Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Pastor Macaulay. I'm the senior pastor for Abundant Life World Ministries in Philadelphia, USA. It's such an honor to have you with us. And we are going to be starting our discussion very soon. Just some few house rules. Resource person today has, some few documents that can help us in budgeting and our finances that he's going to make available. What is going to happen is that there is an email in the chat section after the service or after the program, or whilst the discussion is still going on. Please send us a personal message with your email so that we can forward those documents to you directly. Okay, and when you come in, please comment your name and where you are joining us from. We would love to get to know you as you come on. Okay, thank you very much. We'll begin in a second or two. Great, welcome to Nana joining us from Munya Namdazi in Zambia. Welcome Sharon, also from Zambia, and Mutinta, also from Zambia. God bless you for joining us. Awesome, all right. Well, we're going to start, first of all, with a prayer, as always, and we're going to invite our resource person to begin teaching us. I like to be on time. I like to be timely because I know everybody has something to do on a Saturday, so we are going to be on time. I'm going to say a word of prayer, and I'm going to introduce our resource person, and he's going to start his delivery. If you want to come on camera, that's fine, but just make sure that we are all on mute. After his delivery, there's going to be a time for questions and answers. So whatever question you have, you just hold on until the delivery, and then we can all ask questions for us to get some clarity. Okay. All right. Shall we pray? Father, we thank you for the opportunity to come before your throne of grace. We thank you that we are having the opportunity to learn and how to manage the resource called money. We pray, Jehovah God, that you will teach us something new, and that as we begin another year, we will have money will have the ability to be able to manage the money that comes into our hands, that will have the tools to be able to manage the money that comes into our hands. In the very matchless name of Jesus. Above all, may we be blessed. In Jesus' matchless name. Amen. Amen. So, as I said earlier, the resources are going to be made available. Please send your email to the church's email that is in the comment section, so that afterwards, what I'm going to do is to forward the documents to you, and then we can keep contact and see how we can assist each other in that regard if you don't understand anything. Okay. God bless you for joining us, Miss Tembo. All right. Well, Jamal?
I'm here.
Awesome. So, Jamal has been a wealth management advisor for so many years. He's been personally advising myself and my wife on various financial matters, and he's been really with us from the very word go. He's a really sought after wealth management advisor, and he's going to share the secrets to money management. What we have heard people say is that money is the root of all evil, but it's actually the love of money. And as Christians, or whether you are a Christian or not, in one way or the other, money comes into your hands, and we need to learn how to manage it from the very word go, so that we don't get to the end of the year. It's like, what did I do with the money that comes into my hands? But you should have a system that you are able to track all the resources that come into your hand. So, with much ado, I'm going to allow Mr. Jumo to take over and teach us, show us the ways that we can make this work. God bless you, sir.
Appreciate the nice intro, man. Good morning, everyone. Well, I'm assuming it's morning. Well, it's morning here. I know we got some people from everywhere on here, so good day. I'll put it
All
that
right.
way. But what I wanted to make sure we did today was just kind of touch on some things about um, different point of views from a mindset perspective, but then also some tangible, um, I guess, investment opportunities, saving opportunities, and different strategies, as well as different ways to protect your family and create that generational wealth. Obviously, whenever you're going for generational wealth, or you're the person that's got to set it up or keep it going, sometimes you might run into situations where you're battling these generational curses or so too. So just to have that flexibility, to have that understanding, that way you can implement some of these ideas, is my overall goal today. So I am going to share my screen. I'm going to do a ton of drawing today. Feel free to, get some paper and pencil with you too, and just kind of write with me. I'm just going to kind of go through the mindset piece first, and then we're going to go over um, a couple different things on investments. I will say, because we have a broad audience today, some of these tools may be eligible for some people, some may not, but I'm just going to go over like a general consensus, and then we can go into different specific questions or so. But let's see. And Mark, let me know if you can't see my screen. I'm about to share it.
Okay.
We're gonna go right into it. Um, there we go. Can y'all see that?
Yes.
Gotcha. So hopefully I don't put anybody to sleep, just in case somebody had, a long evening yesterday. But the first thing I want to go into, like I said, is going to be more set of mindset. I feel like, you know, in the state of social media, or where we are now, it's very easy to go online to a social media platform and see everybody and their mama giving financial advice, which is pretty cool, but it also spins a lot of people around, because they'll see so much advice or what's working for everybody. Nobody puts what's not working on social media, or it's very rare. So you're always seeing these different ideas, and just end up trying to chase so many that you end up doing nothing. So when we look at the overall state of the financial mindset or just financial awareness, I'm going to break it down into 5 different steps. So usually, that first step is going to be a step called denial. When you look at the denial stage, this is a situation where you may be in a situation where you don't quite understand how you got here. You don't understand how to get out. Should you try it? There may be some things going on that you just don't want to see. You got mail piling up. You don't want to open the letters. It could be debt collectors calling your phone, and you just don't want to even deal with it. And that's a very familiar stage for a lot of people out there, especially when we're going through crazy economic times or so with Corona. You may find some people out there that are just purely in denial and not completely sure if they want to address things or not, or they just choose not to even pay attention to these things. Um, the next one is going to be, we can call it ambivalence, uh, or uncertainty. All right. This is basically when you choose to either change or you choose to go backwards. Okay. In this stage, you're not in denial anymore. You've actually addressed the fact that you have this need to change, but it's do you want to? Do you want to go through that pain? Do you want to go through that challenge? Do you even want to try to figure it out? Or do you want to stay reasonably comfortable, even though you may still be in a state of denial? Do you still want to stay in that comfort zone? I'm sure somebody on here has probably seen that movie The Matrix or so, and they come to a point where it's like, do you want to take the red pill and see what reality truly is, or do you want to take this blue pill and stay in this fictional world? And that's basically what this stage is. Are you going to take the red pill, or are you going to take the blue pill? Are you going to take that leap of faith, or are you going to stay here? And that's what this step is. Once you choose to change, this is when we go into preparation. All right. And I'm going to go deeper into this preparation stage a little bit later as well. But in this preparation piece, this is when you've already chosen, hey, I'm going to go for it. No matter what's going to happen, I don't like my situation where I'm at now. I need to change. But the crazy part is, once you decide to change, you don't always have those resources. You may not have the full plan to on how to even change, but you just checked off this piece to know that you do need that change. And this is actually where someone like me and people like me, as far as being wealth management advisors or planners, this is where we come in handy, because we can come in, listen to what your goals are. What are you trying to do? What do you want for your family? What do you want for your entire situation? What are those top priorities for you within the next couple of years or years later? Just to understand what that picture needs to look like. And then we can break down these action steps on what we need to do. So in this preparation stage, this is really when you're going to make that plan. All right. And once you make this plan, you get to see, like, okay, this is what it takes for my kids to go to school. This is what it takes for me to get out of debt. This is what it takes for me to get that savings or become a millionaire. Once you get that broken down, this is when we start to get into the next step, which is going to be actions. All right. Actions are going to speak louder than words. Once we get that plan set up, we got to act on it. Usually within my clientele, once we prepare the plan, at the end of us going through the presentation of the plan, we have a sheet that's going to be called an implementation sheet, which basically has all of those top priorities plus a couple items that we may have found while preparing the plan. And it's basically going to say, hey, these are the things we need to act on. When should we act on these? And, basically who's going to be responsible for this? Some things clients are responsible for, some things I'm responsible for. But overall, when you look at the actions that's going to have to come within the plan, you want to make sure that you can break these down into baby steps. All right. If you want to become a millionaire, you don't have savings, well, you might want to go ahead and start acting on building up that 3 months or 6 months of savings. If you're in a situation where you may be the only income in that house, Usually it's going to be more around like a 6 month expenses rule with that. If you're in a situation where you have two incomes coming into a house, you might be able to be in a 3 month saving situation as far as expenses go. But then once you get past that, you may want to look at different opportunities to open up more rate of return or so with your savings, just because in certain places inflation has been so high. Like I know here in the United States, I'm actually talking to y'all from Tennessee right now, so hey everybody, but I know here in the United States, inflation is at its highest since 1982. So we're right here at 7% inflation, but the banks are giving you less than 1%. So when you actually look at the value of your currency, it's actually going down, a little over 6% when you break down the real rate of return, just because everything around you is costing more, but your dollars aren't getting that much. So when you break down actual savings or so, that 3 and 6 month rule really helps. That way you can know to diversify your savings. That way you can grow and outpace that inflation, which I'm going to go deeper into, like different opportunities and what to even look for. But those actions, you want to make sure you have attainable steps. Sorry for the handwriting, y'all, city school. So you want to have some attainable steps, but you also want to have that plan, all right? And accountability, all right? I can't even see my eraser, so I'm just pressing. All right, you want to have that accountability, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your planner, whether it's your closest friend. You want to have that accountability so you don't go backwards. The last step is going to be maintenance. All right. So once you've made it out of denial, you got to the point where you had to take the leap of faith. You took the leap of faith. Now you started to prepare this plan with different action steps. Now you actually have to act on those steps. And then when you look at the actual maintenance, this is more so, hey, I've gotten here, I've made it. I just need to make sure that we are fine tuning this thing. How can we continue to grow? Is everything still in place? You're really just managing, the success that you built. But overall, out of all of these steps over here, you can always go backwards. So we have to watch out for relapse. All right. Now I'm down here in the Bible Belt in the States, y'all. So, they're good to call this the enemy. Honestly, anytime you start to feel success, you start to get a little bit of float, you start feeling a little closer to God. There's usually some kind of little tug that's trying to bring you back to where you started. That's what happens. A lot of people can relapse back into a certain state, or you might just be growing and have completed a level where now you're back at a new height and just had to get used to this new atmosphere. When a couple of years ago, I was working for a pretty sizable financial firm. Mark knows this. And I was kind of in a state of denial. It wasn't necessarily just full finance. It was just the fact that I felt like it was something better for me to be doing, or a more efficient way to provide for clients and a setup for the future than where I was. And I was telling myself, no, this is still the best company. It's still, I was in a state of denial, but then I had to choose. I had to take a choice. Am I going to jump? Am I going to stay? And then I chose to jump. But once I made that plan to jump, we had to prepare, a lot of plans. Well, we had a big plan, but we had to prepare more of a plan with action steps on different things just to constantly manage. So I'm not a pastor like my man Mark here or Pastor Corley. But I do know when I first left, my assistant and I, or my teammate, is actually one of my nephews. First thing we did once I decided to jump and got out of denial, make that choice, we jumped into the book of Daniel. So then when you look at the overall book of Daniel, we were just looking at it from more of the lion's den, to be honest with y'all. Like, okay, let's read about this lion's den and see what's up, because he had to go in the lion's den for a while and come out and he was untouched. But at the same time, when we looked at the overall situation, Daniel actually had money. And Mark, I'll let you preach on that at another time. But that was one of the people in the Bible that actually had money and outlived a good amount of kings. and then boast about having the money, you know. But I say that just because we had to make that choice to go into the Lions Den because we had all these non-competes and all this stuff going. But then as far as preparation, the next thing that we read, we actually went back just to find the story of like Noah's Ark. So when we look at that Noah's Ark story, we had to prepare when God started talking to Noah, he had to build a boat. You know, he had to take that leap of faith just to build a boat. So somebody mute. I think somebody what was that? I'm gonna keep going. Can y'all hear me? I can see Tina. Tina, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? I think Tina can hear me. We might have a lag. Mark, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, gotcha. But yeah, just looking at that ark, you know, he had to choose to actually build and prepare for that rain to hit. But then Acts, you know, so recently we actually jumped into Acts. We actually learned more about Saul becoming Paul. You want to go ahead and get that, Mark?
Yeah, give me a second.
There we go. Cool. So recently, my team and I jumped into the book of Acts, and we really were just trying to learn more about Paul, but we saw the different acts that he had to do just to spread what the mission, you know, overall called for him by God. So just wanted to share that from a Christian perspective, but then also from a financial and mindset perspective, these different steps. So whatever step you're in, if you're in denial, I would recommend, or I would say, go ahead and write out what's bothering you. What are those things? What are those bullies that are in your mind? That way you can pray over them or at least learn how to defeat them. But you have to choose the change that you want to do. Once you get there and you make that choice, if it's financial, find someone like myself. Or you can just kind of work on the plan yourself, but you might need to do a little bit of math and interest rate formulas to figure out what you need. But there's tons of different calculators online now. But you definitely want to make that plan. Once you get that plan, you want to act on it. You don't want to sit on it. You don't want to just have this plan. It's getting dusty because time and things around us are going to change without us, regardless of how we feel. And then once you get everything set up, you do have that maintenance, but always be careful of going backwards and listening to that voice that's trying to pull you back. Let's see, sorry, I need to, that's gonna drive me crazy. Can I erase this? All right, that should come off shortly, y'all. All right, any questions so far? Are we good? Okay, cool. So, what I'm gonna go into now is just more of what avenues are out there. Because I've noticed over the years that a lot of people don't know some of these basic things. And a lot of time, a lot of the education hasn't been, I would say, shared equally amongst a lot of people. But that's my job today. So when we look at these 4 different buckets that y'all probably can see on your screen, the first bucket I'm going to write about is taxable. In this bucket, it's usually going to be your savings, all right, or checking account, just because they can get interest. All right, when you go save money at the bank, they're usually going to say they're going to give you interest. It's not as high as the interest it was in 1980s, you know, but right now you do get a little bit, just a tiny bit. But you also have stocks, you have bonds, you know, you have mutual funds, you have what's called ETFs, which are very similar to mutual funds. You can kind of picture mutual funds as, you can really say like a diced up stocks. It's like fractional shares of stocks. The ETFs are very similar, but they trade on the secondary market, or they actually trade on the stock exchange. Mutual funds are actually the companies that are investing, and they are on the primary market, which means it's all new shares that they are continuously buying. So just within that difference between those two, you can have two different types of, or you can have two different rules as far as taxation goes. But as far as them being in this bucket, they both are taxed by capital gains. The rules just change based on where you are and what the current setting is. But you have real estate in here as well. I know a lot of people like to go buy properties or so. And I'm going to kind of write it outside the bucket, just kind of run that around. But you have the crypto space as well. That's still more in the collectible space right now, or at least treated more on the collectible space. When we look at that, that is something that, at least on the finance side, we're watching, because that I can't. I know he records, so I don't want to say nothing too crazy. But that space has gained a lot of popularity that a lot of people are starting to believe in, and we're starting to see changes in society and in different industries regarding the whole crypto, NFTs, the dollars, the currencies, and it's more to come. The whole blockchain thing is something that's starting to come in for people to learn more about. In that space, it's still so open and wild west that I would actually encourage people to read more on it, versus just following random people's tips. But then the next one is going to be, I'll put tax deferred. All right. In this bucket, we actually have more so annuities. You have real estate in this one too. All right. So what's the difference between the real estate? Well, this one over here is going to be more of your properties. All right. Investment properties. All right. This one over here, that's more of your primary residence. All right. So of course you may have bought a house, maybe on a 30-year plan. You might have bought it for $400,000. In 20 years, if it's worth $750,000, well, that was an investment for you. You decided to sell the house later. You might pay taxes on what that appreciation was in the value of the house. Might, just depends on the rules. Over here, you're actually gaining income from your properties, so it's more so an active passive path for income, depending on how involved you are. But you're also paying taxes on what that's on the income that's coming in. An annuity or annuities are designed so you don't run out of money before you run out of breath. All right, I'll say it again. Annuities are designed so you don't run out of money before you run out of breath. A lot of times, a retiree may gain all this money in different retirement accounts or 401k with a job or retirement plan with a job. And as that money grows, they look like, okay, how can I not lose? I've gained all this money over the last 30, 35 years. Where do I go? They may roll that money into an annuity, which is basically going to look at their lifespan and how much money is involved or inside what they're rolling over. And it's going to pay them a check for the rest of their life. All right. Sometimes you can add what's called period certains on there. So if you pass away within the first 10 years, 20 years or something, they would actually pay those checks to your descendants or beneficiaries. But once again, those annuities are designed so you don't run out of money before you run out of breath. So if you live to be 120, that check is still coming. All right. And it's still tax deferred because you're not paying taxes on that until you actually start to draw that check. And that's going to be based on how much you put in and how much, growth when they start to calculate that tax. Another thing is going to be more on the tax deductible side. All right. So in this tax deductible side, many people out there have what's called like 401ks. That's probably one of the most popular. You also have 403b. You have TSP. A lot of times military personnel or government employees may have it. And then you have IRAs, all right, individual retirement accounts. So that 401k, 403b, and TSP are all basically going to be the same thing. They're just going to be different um, retirement accounts based on what type of entity you have. So a 401k may be with a private entity. A 403b may be with a nonprofit. So a 401k you may see at a Walmart or so. A 403b you may see at a hospital or with a school system. A TSP you may see with the military or so, which that's thrift savings plan, but they all operate on the same rules. So here in the United States, you can actually put $20,500 into one of those this year as a max contribution from you and deduct that 20,500 from what your income was. So if you're at 100,000, you're basically going to get taxed at 79,500 if you chose to max that account out. And I know there are similar programs throughout the country. Well, obviously these are programs here in the U.S., but when you start to expand, a lot of different programs are out there, basically with the same rules. It just depends on where you are. But those IRAs, we look at those as more so individual retirement accounts. So as you look at these IRAs, if you don't have a main employer or you're self-employed, IRAs are usually going to be a good way to help. Those individual retirement accounts, at least right now in a traditional IRA, you can put away $6,000. You still get the deduction on that. So if you were at 100,000, now you're getting taxed off 94. Not as big of a write-off here, but at the same time, you're able to put this money away, get a tax deduction, which may turn into a tax credit here in the United States soon under the Biden administration. We'll see. Still watching that, but you're able to grow interest and compound interest over time within that account just from the investment. So these over here, these accounts right here, the 401k, 403b, TSP, IRAs, they are usually funded by these over here. All right. So you might have mutual funds or ETFs or even stocks and bonds inside your 401ks, 403bs, TSP, or just retirement plans in general. And those are going to be the drivers. So if you kind of picture what these different accounts are, they're basically a car, just saying what rules you're going to have to apply by. All right. There, you can kind of picture like if you have your car, you can drive your car, I can drive your car, Pastor Corley can drive your car. Sorry, you probably prefer to be the driver, or you probably prefer to be the driver of your car over me and Pastor Corley. So it's a matter of finding what's going to be the driver that fits you, which also comes down to what's called asset allocation. Didn't plan to go into that, but I might as well. So when you look at asset allocation, y'all, it's basically going to come down to two things. You're going to have equities and you're going to have fixed income. All right. Which usually is going to be, equities are going to come down to ownership. Fixed income is going to come down to debt. All right. So as we look at the equity side, that's going to be more on stocks and ownership percentages of different companies in different forms. But that ownership is basically saying, hey, I own a piece of the company, so any dividends or gains that we have, I'm entitled to receive. When you look at the fixed income side, they usually involve debt, which is usually going to involve bonds. So when you look at bonds in an overall sense, bonds are debt. They are more so of an IOU than you would say equities are. Equities are basically you have this ownership. Bonds are more like, hey, give me $1,000. I'm gonna give you 6% on this bond, and in 10 years, I'm gonna give you your $1,000 back. But along the way, I'm gonna pay you 6% of that $1,000. So you may get $60 every year, and bonds usually pay every 6 months. So you're really looking to get $30 every 6 months with these until 10 years comes in. And that's what's called the maturity date. When you get to that date that they agreed to pay you that money back, or when the bond matures, and you get that $1,000 back. So you're able to get that $1,000 back plus $60 over 10 years. So you really got $1,600 back, or made 600 over the course of that 10 years. But it's as you're getting that 60 each year or 30 every 6 months, that's the fixed income. So that's where the fixed income comes in. So usually when you look at portfolios, you're going to have percentages. You might have something where it's like 25% fixed income and 75% equities. All right. Usually, if you see a percentage like that, or a breakdown, or asset allocation, if you see an asset allocation like that, there's usually going to be for a younger person. If you want to look at like those general rules that individuals like to throw out, usually your age is going to be the portion of fixed income that you would go for. Not always a guarantee. I always have people fill out questionnaires just to make sure like we're right on what their risk tolerance is. But just from a general sense, if you're out there just doing stuff on your own and you start getting lost in the weeds or so, when you look at your overall portfolio, the equities are going to have way more risk. All right, y'all can watch the stock market in 2008. You saw what happened, but ever since then, it's basically been going up. 2018 was one of those years where it kind of fell, but basically, investments in equities have been going up. So when you look at your overall portfolio, younger people are able to have more risk involved because they're not going to retire for another 20, 30 years. Whereas someone that's 55, they're probably looking like, okay, I'm about to get up out this thing in 5 years if I don't have to slap Sally next week, So that's basically how you're going to break down these asset allocations. Because someone that's 55, they may be 45% equities and 55% stock fixed income. But then if they're about to retire and they built up a nice nest egg, they may not even take that much risk. They may even go a little bit higher on fixed income, or if they have multiple assets, and this is I think I zoomed out a little too hard. There we go. If they have multiple assets, that actually helps them as far as diversification. They can be a little bit more risky and stay aggressive. So the better you are diversified and the more income and wealth that you build for yourself, the more risky you can be. But if you feel like you only have this one account, you're not as well diversified, you have to be a little bit tighter, just to protect what you're building or what you've built. So I hope that helps. Also, before I jump within these accounts, you might see what's called target dates. All right. With these target dates, you're usually going to see them go by 5s and 10s. So you might have a target date 2020, a 2030, a 2040, 50, 60. Those are basically going to say, hey, you're going to turn retirement age in the United States 59 and a half, close to one of these years. Which year is it going to be? And it's going to start off more aggressive with more equities, but then the closer you get to retirement age, it's going to get more conservative over time. So it will naturally change if you go with a target date. So if you're planning for your kids to go to school and they're going to school in 8 years, well, you may look at a target 2030 fund because they're going to be in school in 2030. Hopefully that makes sense. Should be pretty self-explanatory, but that's just one thing about target dates. But those are usually going to be mutual funds or ETFs. The majority of the time you see a target date, they're probably going to be a mutual fund. So then the last bucket is going to be more tax-free. All right. So within this bucket, you have whole life insurance. You have Roth IRAs. You have what's called 529 plans. You have municipal bonds. All right. The thing about municipal bonds, they're bonds that are bought within municipalities. The name comes from muni bonds. But depending on where you live, like if you live in that state and you bought municipal bonds for that state, they're usually going to be tax-free. If you bought municipal bonds in another state, you may still get taxed on them. But they are on the more conservative route, fixed income route. But then the 529 plans are going to be a way to put money away for education, grow that money tax free, pull that money out tax free. And as long as it's for education. All right. So you can't just say, hey, we're finna go buy this house and do whatever. Like, you have to put it towards tuition or so. The Roth IRAs are going to be tax free individual retirement accounts. So you're able to put that money away. Right now, the max in the United States is 6,000. If you're over 50, you can put another 1,000 in. Matter of fact, if you're over 50, you can put another 6,500 in the 401k, 403b, and TSP. But the Roth options allow you to grow the money. You don't get that tax write-off that people are usually looking for, but in the future, you're able to pull that money out or withdraw that money without any taxation. So basically, looking at where we are as the economy right now, we probably can see some tax increases happening at some point just for the sustainability. And then the whole life insurance. The thing about whole life insurance, a lot of times you got a lot of insurance agents that are just pushing it on people. It is a little bit more expensive than like its term counterpart. Whenever you start to break down risk management, you have what's called term and you have the whole life side. Term is usually going to be a little bit cheaper. You can get a lot more benefit, a little bit more bang for your buck. You might have $1 million policy at $50 compared to $1 million policy whole life that's at $1,000. The thing is, term is going to expire. All right, term is going to expire. So it's for a term. Just like here in the States, the president's in for 4 years or 8 years, then they're out. All right. Same thing with that policy. You're going to have for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, then it's gone. With a whole life policy, it's way more pricey, but it's going to be guaranteed, which is why it's more pricey. But then they usually are going to grow cash value in the policy that's accessible. All right. So if you, over time, that cash value grows, you can actually call and take a loan out on the policy and pull that money out tax free, and do whatever you need to do with it just at your leisure. You can go to Puerto Rico, you can pay off some debt, you can pay off a wedding, whatever you need to do with it. You can pull that money out tax free and not even pay it back. The thing is, whenever you pass away, they just take out what you owe or took a loan against yourself from the death benefit, but the death benefit has also been growing. So you may have started at $1 million, but now it's at 1.5 years later, and you pulled out 200,000. Well, your family's still going to get 1.3 million tax free. All right, and that's just within the whole life policy. So it's not a matter of saying like, hey, which one was your favorite? All right, that's not the case. I know there are malls everywhere, and everybody's seen at least one of those turnkey machines, those little red machines with the Skittles and the M&Ms or whatever. You put your quarter in or so, turn the dial, and then the candy comes out. And that's exactly what this is like. We have these different buckets or so, and if taxes are high, we're going to use the tax-free money. If taxes are low, it might be a good window to use our taxable funds. If the market crashes, we have things that are not tied to the stock market, like certain whole life policies may not be tied to the market. Bonds usually are going to be part of it, but them and the stocks actually kind of support each other, almost like in a teeter-tot setup. But they both can be negative at the same time. They both can go down. But you also want to have some things that are liquidity, or have that liquidity like a savings account and checking where you built that 3 months, that 6 months. But then far as like your retirement accounts, you can't touch those until age 59 and a half, because you may have penalty, at least based on the U.S. rules. But yeah, any questions so far? Mark, do you have anything that you want to kind of throw in there? I know we're not like in a class setting or like in a auditorium, but any questions so far? Oh, I can't hear you, man. You look like you're saying some good words though.
Definitely just following, trying to get a grasp of the discussion. But if there is anybody on who has questions so far, we've talked about, the taxable, the tax deferred, tax deductible, tax free elements. The what I'm getting from your presentation is that there are various ways by which we can save. There are various ways by which we can put money aside. In the US, there are tax deductible activities, investments that you can make. Outside the US, they may not know anything about probably, 401k, but they may have some other financial options depending on the company they work with. So in that regard, from what we have done so far, you have just, that's what I'm saying, that, just like myself, many others are just following the trend that you are going and giving us. So you are just giving us options through which we can save, opportunities by which we can save. If you go into real estate, you are able to write off some of those taxes. If you have mortgage, you're able to write off some of those taxes. So we are definitely following, but I don't know if there's anybody else on the line who has a question so far with reference to what Mr. Jumal has just said. Is there anybody with a question? You can just unmute yourself, come on a video and just ask your question.
And I can see the chat too. So if you want to just throw it in the chat.
Yeah, if you want to put the question also in the chat, I can also read that. But this is a class. So if there is something that you don't understand, or you want him to be able to tailor what he's saying specifically to your situation, if you are not in the US, you can give a scenario of your situation and ask how he can do that. Okay, so let me just give you one question, then you can move on from there. Okay. All right. So Mr. Tambo from Zambia is saying, looking at all these types of avenues, what are the individual pros and cons? I feel it was all up to preference. Why is it that people still opt for taxable ones when they can easily invest in non-taxable avenues?
I think that's an awesome question.
Yeah.
That's a really awesome question. I missed the name, but whoever asked that, I definitely appreciate it. But that's a really good question. Yeah, I missed it again, but sorry. But yeah. So to answer that, the taxable piece may have a little bit more upside. All right. So within these muni bonds, they're going to be a little bit safer than what their corporate bond counterparts may offer. All right. So a company like Walmart, a company like Amazon, Tesla, they can actually go out and issue corporate bonds just to raise capital for the business and basically say, hey, we're going to give you this money in 10 years. Like, hey, y'all give me $500. Y'all give me $1,000. This is the company, not me. I know we recorded. Y'all give the company $1,000 to buy this bond. In 10 years, we're going to give you that $1,000 back. Well, we're going to pay you a 12%. Whereas the muni bond is being funded more so by revenue from an airport or toll bridges or so. Two different levels, especially when you look at, some of these Fortune 500 companies, the way they're just shooting up right now, so you might have a tax-free option to go with one of these, but far as the rate of return and the gains and just that ceiling may be slightly higher, maybe on the taxable side. And within this taxable side, you have the stock market, which when you look at 100%, equity portfolio since like 1929 is probably averaging closer to 10%. All right. Whereas, anything else or less has probably done a little bit lower. Savings and checkings. Like I said, it's not the 80s anymore. If anybody's out there getting, some high percentages in their bank account, please share. But it's not really out there right now, like it used to be. Like I said, in the 80s or so, where CDs were getting insane rates. So in a situation like that, it's better to, or it may be better to just have liquid savings of what you're going to need. So you might be in a situation where, you might be by yourself. You got 6 months saved up, but you might need a little bit more cash because you're about to buy a house, or you're about to start a business, or you're about to, do some other thing that you just been, in denial about and chose to do and just create a plan. So you need this liquidity to take care of whatever that venture is going to be. So feel free to have the cash of what you need. But right now, cash isn't giving you much interest at the bank, but the inflation is just creeping up like crazy. Like I said earlier, we're at 7% inflation, but we haven't been that high since 1982. I think July 1982. So when you look at this, just the overall sense, that's a quick pro and con of just sitting on too much cash. When you look at the stocks and bonds, of course, when you start to buy stocks, there's a chance that that company can just flat out go away. When we saw 2008 sweep through, especially for I would say for anybody that's in the States, you probably saw the Best Buy in Circuit City. You probably remember those. Best Buy still made it. Best Buy still out here. Circuit City, not so much. Like we used to get those coupons to go buy CDs. Shout out to everybody that know what a CD is. Not the bank CD, actual round disc that you play music. That's actually old school now. But we used to go to the store and get CDs from places like Circuit City. Now they're no longer here, and some big banks didn't even make it through that. So stocks definitely have a lot more risk, but they also have a lot more upside. But to participate within that upside, governments know where the hot stuff is going to be. So that's when they, got to get their cheese to, got to get their cut to. So they know that the upside is going to be over there, or most things are going to be set up based on this, and based on like us having like the piece of capitalism here in the States. That's always, I can't say that's always, but that's been a big part of just economic success here, along with other things. Now I'll get into that, but when we look at things like mutual funds and ETFs, when we think about pros and cons there, like the mutual funds, you won't have as much risk, say, as owning a full share of a stock. All right. So you can have, say, like one share of Apple. I know that's an ugly apple, y'all. You can have one share of Apple for X amount. All right. I'm going to put an X. Or you can take that same amount and put into like a tech mutual fund, where now you're getting more than Apple. You got Apple there, but you also have Amazon. You might have Tesla or something in there. Like you can split that across, kind of split your chips better. That's where like a mutual fund comes in, and ETFs are very similar. Even those are going to have two different rules, whereas the mutual funds, because they are primary market investments, whenever they release those dividends and capital gains from just the growth of the equities inside, that is considered taxable. All right. Whereas secondary investments like stocks and ETFs that are trading on the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ, and you see the ticker and all that stuff, those are going to be secondary investments. So those secondary investments can be taxed when you actually sell the stocks. All right. Another pro and con between like the mutual funds and ETFs, mutual funds are redeemed. All right. ETFs are traded. So with those mutual funds, you may say, hey, I'm about to sell this fund today at 11:39 a.m. Well, it's not gonna trade at that value it was at 11:39. It's gonna trade at the value at the end of the day. So whatever it was at the end of the day, that's what a mutual fund is gonna pull from. And let me correct myself. Mutual funds are redeemed at the end of the day. They're not traded. So whatever that value is, kind of if you kind of picture like the fun and game places, Chuck E. Cheese, stuff like that. You go in, you play the games, you get the tickets. At the end of your time there, you basically take your tickets to the counter. Now they got the ticket machines and cards and all this stuff, but you basically go to the counter, see how many points you earn, and you redeem it for the teddy bears or candy, cotton candy, whatever. You redeem that stuff at the end. That's what the mutual funds are like. So you may say, hey, let me sell this fund this morning, but you don't get the value until that evening, of what it closed at the end of the day. The ETFs are going to be based on that time. So if you did it at 11:39, it's at 11:39. So if everything was falling that day and you tried to go in and let me sell real quick, where you locked it in on that 11:39 time, whereas the mutual fund is going to have to keep catching it until the end of the day. So the ETFs can actually give you a little bit more flexibility at times, but that's not to say that the mutual funds aren't going to be good. It's just kind of like, which one do you want to go with? But then, like I said earlier, those equities are going to have a lot more risk where you can actually lose, money or so. The annuities, a pro for that would be more so the fact that you can't outlive the money. Period. That's an awesome setup. If you got somebody out there that's bad with money, maybe like an older family member or so, and they're horrible with their money, and they got like all this retirement money out there, but they just kind of pull it and yank it and stuff, but they may need like a fixed income setup. An annuity may be something to look at. That could be a quick pro for them because it's going to give them a check along with Social Security if they're getting it, where they're able to just draw their income and have that sustainability until God calls them home ultimately. So that's a pro for an annuity. A con would be what company you go with. So usually if you're going to go into a relationship where companies are guaranteeing to pay you, you want to make sure that you look at the financial strength of the company. Because oftentimes people will go and just, look for what's going to be the cheapest or, something like a super high rate that's being promised, but then you need to look and make sure that company's going to even be here. Because if they're guaranteeing to pay you, $5,000 a month until, for the next 30, 40 years, you want to make sure like, hey, are y'all even 30, 40 years old? How have y'all performed in it? Or what are some things y'all have made it past? And then there's also what's called financial strength ratings out there with those different companies. So usually if it's a company offering you an annuity, which is more so like a life insurance product, it's probably an insurance company being involved, and the insurance companies have what's called financial strength ratings. And you can actually go look and see what their rating is compared to other offers out there, just to make sure that money is going to be, or just to show what the strength and likelihood is that company's going to be here. So there's a lot of companies that's been around since the 1800s, more so late 1800s. There are some from more mid 1800s out there. I'll let y'all read into that one, but as far as just the overall sense, you can go in and see like how strong the companies are or so, but and what their histories look like and how they performed and how they interacted with the public. So with those annuities, that's a quick pro and con. The real estate, of course, having that out there is an asset alone when you have the actual asset. So when you have the properties on your net worth statement, you got this one at this address, you got this one at this address, you got this one in this country, you got this one in that country. All of that's in your asset class. All right. All of that's in your asset portfolio. But then the thing about real estate, something needs to happen with it. You can have it as an asset and it can appreciate it and sell it later, or you can flip it and stuff too. But if you actually have it, it's kind of there. Are you renting it out? Are you going to renovate it and then flip it? Like what are the different things? But then you might run into a situation like last year, or more so 2020 when Corona first really kind of hit the global scene. Some people lost jobs, Some people weren't able to go to work. Some people didn't have a job where they were able to flip and go digital. Fortunately, I had already been prepping my whole firm to basically be digital. We're probably 90% digital and 10% in person now. So a lot of people didn't have that luxury, or that ability to go into that. So some people did lose jobs, and in those situations, they aren't able to rent. They may not be able to pay the rent and stuff. So like if you're kind of doing it independently, you might have a tenant that can't afford it, but you still have the mortgage, involved with this. Whereas now you might have to come out of pocket. So that could be a con with real estate. But then the thing about real estate is you have the ownership of that property, that land, whatever it is, and you can actually pass that down. And Mark and I talk about like traditional African and African American families where we can be known to have some land somewhere, and it could have come from like grandma and granddad, great grandma's great granddad's parents, siblings, whoever. We've been known to get what we can and try to get it to the next person. That's actually been something. And then you can actually see like, okay, that's a pro in itself. But if it's not listed out properly, that can be a con as well as you start to pass these different real estate properties or pieces of land to the next generation. If there's no plan involved, that can start the fights and frictions, because now it used to be one person owned it. They had 4 kids, they were gone. Now it's 4 people, that own it. And if it's not like some land where several acres to divvy up, conflict can happen. So within that conflict alone, that can be a con, especially if those kids let it go to the grandkids, because I see it in certain situations where it can roll to grandkids, and now you're dealing with 20 people trying to figure out 2 acres, versus that one person that could have just had a plan of action, like, hey, sell this, go buy that, whatever. And then the retirement account, so if you put money in there, you really can't pull that out without penalties. Here in the States, it's 59 and a half. Depending on where everyone is, you might have a different set of rules. The way the internet works, you can basically take one of these accounts and just Google it or look it up on the internet what your version of this would be. But you really can't touch retirement accounts until your retirement age. And if so, you might have that penalty involved along with taxes. And then the whole life insurance is basically going to come down like annuities. You want to make sure it's going to be a solid company that's had a nice performance. So there's a ton of them out there that have them. It's different ones. Sometimes they even try to come up with different nicknames. You might have like universal life or variable life, but sometimes even within those policies, they're more so like a term policy with an increase in cost inside. So that's something that you want to make sure you can watch, because sometimes that cost can come in and start to eat away your cash value. And while I'm saying it, I'll just kind of draw it over here. I feel like I got another question in there, but when you look at like a universal or like a variable policy, all right, sorry it's not writing so smooth, y'all. You usually have like the money side and you have the insurance side. And let's say you're paying $100 a month. Well, at the beginning, maybe $90 went to the money side and only $10 went to the insurance side. All right. Which looks really good on the front end, but then over time, the cost of the insurance starts to increase. All right. So now instead of $10, you're paying $50 for the cost of the insurance, and only 50 is going to your cash, because you're still paying $100 a month. All right. But then over time, you get to the point where it's like, okay, I'm paying $100, but it's like zeros going to it. Now, you might have started this at age 35 or so, and now you're 55 when this happens, but you may not even get it. You may not even see that you're at $100 as far as the cost, because you still have cash in the overall account that's built up over that time period. But the thing is, the cost of the insurance can still increase. And as it still increases, now that money starts to come out of your account. And a lot of people may have universal and variable policies out here and not even realize that the cost of the insurance has increased so drastically that it's actually pulling some of their money out of the account just to cover the cost of the insurance. So that's a con that can happen just within insurance, or at least a universal and variable life policy. Traditional whole life policies, they are usually going to have the cost of the insurance locked in at a fixed rate. Usually, it's usually going to be a fixed rate that's going across. It might be like, instead of being 10 at the beginning, it might be 30, but it's been 30 all this time. And then you can actually have it paid up at certain ages. So you might have the policy paid up at age 65. So you start at 35, you paid it till 65. And now at 65, you don't have to put another dime in it. And that policy that you pay for within that 30 years is guaranteed to go to your family. But keep in mind, the whole life policy is usually going to be a little bit more expensive than like this term counterpart. Term is more like renting. Whole life is going to be more like owning a house. So it's going to have more appreciation and a higher cost to it. At some point in your life, you probably will want a whole life policy just to make sure that it's guaranteed for the rest of your years. Because once you start getting to like age 60, age 70, insurance companies really ain't trying to, bring you on. Like, they know you're a lot closer to 100 than a 20-year-old that they can go get premiums from for the next 50 years or so. Whereas if you're 70, they're looking like, okay, at max, you got 30, 40 years. So they might charge you an arm and a leg, but usually when it comes down to a term policy, they're not even going to want to do it with someone, when you start to get to those ages. So you want to make sure that you actually look at locking in your health too. So if you're pretty healthy, a pro would be lock in policies while you're healthy, because the more you have on your medical notes and records can hurt you when it's ultimately trying to get those policies. So that can be a quick con on those. Roth, you can actually pull out your contributions after 5 years with no penalties, no tax. But the 529 plans, the con would be you can't really pull that money out for other reasons than education. A quick pro would be it can roll to siblings. So if you have 2 kids and say the oldest gets full ride scholarship or goes to the military or so, you can actually take their 529 money, put it with the siblings 529, and pay for the full tuition or pay with all of the money for the sibling. And it also works for first cousins and parents too, or folks in the household. So if all your kids got full rides, you can actually go back and get a doctoral or something with their 529.
Jamal, there's a question on the term life insurance from Ms. Rachel. For someone in the early or mid 30s, is it better to explore whole or term life insurance, or which is more preferred in general?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Rachel. I think I said that right. It really comes down to the scenario. So if you are in a place where you have kids in a higher need, like, hey, if something happens to you and you got kids, you're the one that's taking them to bus stops or driving them to school. You're the one that's going to these activities with them. You're the one that's with them day to day, helping them build their habits. Then the term side, at least from a planning perspective, is going to give you more benefit at a cheaper rate. All right. Whereas the whole life, the earlier you start, the lower that monthly is going to be. So like $1 million whole life when you're 30 might be closer to like $1,000 a month, but $1 million whole life when you're 40 might be like 1,500, 1,600 or so, because it constantly increases the older you get, but it's going to stay level the entire time. So usually it's going to come down to like, what is your need? That's going to, whenever you're looking at life insurance, take the products out first. All right. Don't even look at what the products are going to be looking like. Look at what the need is. If you're not here and you got kids, well, if you're not here, who's going to take care of them? That's one question. Who can you trust to take care of them? All right. We got who's going to take care of them. Who can we trust with the money? Because the person that might have all the love and all this stuff, might need some accountability because they're bad with money. So that could be another situation where we start to get what's called trustees involved, which are going to be the individuals that can come to me and say, hey, Jamal, we know she left $3 million. We need to pull out, a couple thousand for education and stuff. So you can actually have a couple of them just to keep accountability going. But just to answer the question, you want to make sure you know what that need is, who's going to take care of kids or so, or your assets when you're gone, and how much is that stuff even going to look like. So you might have like our education for 2 kids. By the time they get there, if they're like 5 or so, maybe 50 grand each, depending on like if it's a state school, HBCU, or a private school, might be 100,000, 150 by the time they get to 18. Well, put that number in there. If you aren't here, at a minimum, what do your kids or your spouse or your parents that you're taking care of, whoever it is, what do those dependents or folks that you are helping need on a monthly basis? All right, well, we got that monthly. How long are they going to need it? So we got that monthly times 12 is 1 year. If they need it for 5 years, and 60, we talking about 60 months. So you can take 3 grand, 4 grand, 5 grand, whatever it is, multiplied by 60. That's going to give you that number, and then you might have like some funeral costs and stuff like that if you want to throw that stuff in there, like 20 grand or so. I know you can get it for much cheaper. We ain't finna swing it, throw nobody in no ditch, so like you want to make sure that you have at least some of those, 10 grand, 13, 20s, you might be able to get a good portion in there. But what are they going to need as far as the income goes? Any debts that you need to take care of that way they don't come out the family. What is education going to look like for dependents, or if you have a family member in an adult daycare situation, or they got nurses coming to the house, what are those expenses looking like? You want to calculate that need first. Once you have the need, go for the need, because, and that's going to come down to cash flow too. So it might come back that you need $1.5 million. Well, if cash flow says that you can afford the whole life and pay it up in 20 years, might want to go ahead and do it. But if cash is saying, hey, just lock in that term policy, it's going to be less than $100. You can create your savings, get your investments on, then circle back, then do it. That works. And then you might have a mixture of both. You might be in a situation where it's like, all right, I know I need 1.5. I'm gonna have 300,000 in whole, and I'm gonna have another 1.2 in term insurance. That way I can cut the cost of having a big whole life policy, but I'm able to leverage the lower cost of the term and still have the full 1.5 that's needed to take care of the family and the income and the final expenses or so. So I'm hoping that makes sense. I don't want to talk your head off anymore, but I'm hoping that was kind of straight to the point and help. Do we have another question, Mark?
No, that's it for now. But as you put it in the chat, if anybody has any question, once you go ahead with your delivery, they'll put it in, and I'll just pause you. I'll just address it.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, cool. I'm gonna go over a couple more things. We might even get out early. It's a Saturday, so I'm pretty sure some of y'all might appreciate that. But I'm gonna talk about credit for a little minute. Like I said, I'm down here in Tennessee, y'all. I'm from Memphis, born and raised. I was actually born up the street in a little park called Millington, but I went home in Memphis. So, but basically grew up there. And one thing about this stuff, like all the stuff that I'm drawing, once I started learning this and saw how complex it looks, but how you can break it down, I was a little bit disappointed that we didn't learn this stuff in school. So I kind of teach it like people are in school. But one thing about this, I'm gonna go over like the credit piece, because this is one of the things that affects where you can even go. When it's time to buy a house, they're gonna run your credit. When it's time to buy a car, if you're gonna finance it, they're gonna, go through your credit. If you're about to get a business loan, credit. So overall, you're gonna break it down into 5 things. Okay. The first one is gonna be payments. All right. And that's basically on time. And that's at 35%. So if something happens where you're missing payments, you're actually burning yourself up. Even if you can call them, work it out where you can maybe get a lower payment or so. You just want to try to make those payments on time. All right. And this really breaks down like a school score. When you first get into a class, no matter where you are, they usually give you like an agenda or so, and they'll say like, hey, this is how much your tests are going to be over your overall score. This is how much your homework's going to be. This is how much your class attendance is going to be. This is how much your lab is going to be of the overall grade. That's the same thing for like the credit piece. So like 35% is just making your payments on time. If you can make those payments on time, boom, that's a big chunk. Another 30, hopefully this 30 is not bigger than my 35, but I'm gonna put 30% is the amount owed. All right. How much do I owe? So out of that 30%, you can also remind yourself that it matches up perfectly with the 30% that they want you to stay under. So if you went out and took out a $10,000 line, well, you probably should try to stay under $3,000 at least by the time it reports. All right, because under 30 is going to give you better points, or is actually going to help you, but over 30 is going to hurt you. All right, even 31s and 32s will take away points. And when I said reporting date, that's another thing that a lot of people miss. No one tells you like, hey, go look for the reporting date. What that reporting date is gonna say is, hey, this is when we're gonna tell the bureaus what you paid us and what your balance is. All right. So a lot of people are out here and they know like my card is due on the 15th. So the 15th comes around, paid it off on the 14th. 15th is in there, payments processed. It's a zero balance. I'm on track. I'm making my payments on time. The 16th, they go out, they use their card again. They went to the mall. They went and got their groceries for them and the kids. They went and got gas. They went and put all these extra expenses on her. It doesn't mean that they went out and, bought out the whole church, for a full dinner, but they may have just went and spent some money. So then on the 17th or 18th, the credit card company reports it. Usually it's a couple of days after the reporting date, but it just depends on the carrier. It could be totally different wherever you are. But usually there's going to be a reporting date after that due date where they're sending it to the bureau. So even though you paid it and you had it at $0 on the 15th, when you went and got your lunch and gas and groceries and went to the mall and stuff on the 16th, they're going to report those new purchases on the 17th or 18th. This is just for example purposes, but they're going to report those. So you may have thought that they were reporting at zero, but they actually went and reported $2,000, which may not have hurt you, but at the same time, you could have been, you actually could have reported it at zero on the 17th or 18th, just a few days later, just by like, okay, well, I'm not going to use the credit card. I'm going to pay cash. Because you may just be in a situation where you're using credit cards and paying it off by the time that due date comes, but they're actually reporting it a couple of days later. And you might see that with a couple of people. They're like, hey, I built my credit up. I pay it off on time, but I keep seeing they're taking points out. I don't know why. You may be using a card like the day after the reporting date. So, but that's also going to come down to the amount owed. You want to try to keep that under 30%, pay them on time. And I mean, that's 65% of the score right there. So then another 15 is going to be history. All right. So that's 15%. So, I mean, you're basically looking at 80% of the score right there. The history is going to come down to how many payments were you making on time, how long, what's your oldest line of credit, stuff like that. That's just one of the things we can't really like alter. I mean, you have credit specialists that can go out and delete stuff and get stuff challenged with the bureaus or so. But for the most part, you want to just try to keep a good history. If you're just starting, you got somebody younger involved, you want to make sure that habit and that good history is there from the jump. Like you might only had this card for 6 months or a year. Well, let's try to make these payments on time. Find out when your reporting date is, and make sure that you have a zero balance. And that's going to start you off with a great history. Someone that's a little bit deeper in the game, if you're doing this just yourself, it almost can feel like turning the ship. you know. So when you're looking at that, you really just have to know these two right here, and that's going to start to turn the ship for you. Then you might have like a specialist or something that go. I'm not the specialist for credit. I just know enough for helping the clients. But as far as like going in and disputing and all that stuff, there's people out there for that, that'll go out and help you dispute. That way they can clean up some of that history, if you will. And then the last ones are going to be 10 and 10. It's going to be diversification. There we go. And like new lines. All right, so you really don't want to go over 2 lines each year. If you can stay under 2, that's usually going to help you. I mean, sometimes people may end up buying a house and a car in the same year, or like starting a business and getting a car or so in the same year. You might want to talk to the accountant if you're planning that route, because order of operations, depending on why you got the car, the business probably should come first, but it depends. But ultimately, the overall credit score is going to come down to this, where it's like, hey, if I'm making my payments on time and I know when it's reporting, I can make sure that balance, is at a 0 or lower, or try to get it under 30 as possible. If you're starting out, make sure that history's starting off pretty strong. If you got a pretty bad history, well, we got to try to turn that ship. You might not have to dispute, because when people start to get to those lower numbers, you just taking care of these gives you more of the bigger chunks. Folks with higher credit scores probably notice how they move a little bit tighter the higher you are, but when you're in like 5s and 6s, you might see like a 50-point, increase out of nowhere, just because you paid it on time and got that balance paid off, or just paid it down. I don't see any new things in the chat, so I'm gonna go a little bit deeper. So when we're looking at like paying different things off, maybe you have like a 20% credit card, maybe you have like a 10%, something like that. Well, you have what's called an avalanche technique. All right, I give y'all some mountains or something, we get some mountains involved, put a little snow or something up there. So you have an avalanche technique. Let's see, it's avalanche, so we put a little snow. And then you also have the snowball. All right, I just feel like snowball. So when we look at the snowball versus the avalanche, the snowball is just basically saying, hey, we're going to take, how much do I need to pay each month? What are my minimums? All right, so when you look at what are the minimums of each card or each loan that you have or each debt, what are the minimums that everyone's going to take? Okay, you got those. What can I afford to put on these? Okay, now you're here. All right. Once you identify what you can put on them, now you're looking at the order of operations. So like the snowball usually is going to be just taking that extra, it's a snowball, and throwing it on whatever you decide to throw on it. Usually that snowball is going to go after the lowest balance. All right. Just like, hey, which one's the one that I can knock out the quickest? Well, that one's 3,000, that one's 10,000, that one's 13. Let me go for this 3,000 just to knock it out. The avalanche technique is going to be more based off of interest. All right. So if that one's $3,000, but it's at 24%, but this one over here is $6,000 or $10,000, and it's at 5%, which one should I go for? And that's where you can crack down percentages, because even though that was at 3, that 24 is going to tear you up if you're not paying attention to it. Like you might be going for the big one on some snowball stuff. Well, I'm sorry, that's probably not the best, because if you're going for the lowest balance, you still do it with the snowball. But if that $10,000 is at 24, you still got this, that $3,000 at 5. You can weigh it, because that $10,000 at 24, even though you can knock out that snowball faster, 24% on $10,000 is gonna just turn into something crazy, especially when you start to get into like tens of thousands of dollars in high interest credit cards. So the avalanche technique is basically taking all of the interest rates and seeing what's going to be the fastest way to pay it off, but you're mainly going to attack the highest interest rate first. But everybody has a preference. With that snowball technique, um, some people may see that it's going to take a little bit longer, maybe like an extra month or two in interest, or they may have to pay a little bit more interest, but that loan might be so small and attainable that that might be the one thing that helps them trigger, or help them commit to paying off everything. So it might be 1,500, $3,000, but that's something you can knock out. You sick of getting that letter, you sick of getting that mail. Let's go ahead and knock that out. And that's part of, I just moved diversification. But that's something that can help you go ahead and knock everything out and get that momentum mentally. That way you can commit, and stay within the plan. Because some people might go for the big ones, see that, they're getting some good chunks, but it's still not happening. And they start to pivot. Well, I got that vacation coming up. So-and-so just asked me to be in a wedding. I need to, okay, instead of paying that amount, I'm just going to do the wedding. And I'm going to put the wedding on the card, like all these other things can start to come in. So once you lock in on like a strategy that you feel like it's going to work the best for you, go ahead and create that plan and just stick with it. So, man, I've been drawing a lot. So I'm hoping all this is making sense. You got the snowball versus the avalanche. Avalanche is going to be more of interest first. Snowball is usually going to be the lowest balance. When you look at the credit piece, you got 35% of payments or is making your payments on time. 30% is going to be the amount owed. Remember that reporting date. All right, remember that reporting date out there. 15% is going to be that credit history. New lines and diversification going to be 10 each. I mean, be careful with these. Don't go out there and just get 4 or 5 new lines, but these two right here, that's 20%. This 80% that you can focus on is going to bring you back, or can bring you back. The universal and variable policies, if you do end up with one of those, variable is going to give you a little bit more upside. So pro would be including like stock market or index funds, mutual funds. Index funds are basically mutual funds that follow indexes. The universal and variable life policies, they do have the pros and cons, but we went over that. Just make sure if you see it, look at your ledger, and usually on the ledger, it'll show you a negative year if it's projected to go negative. They may show you 3 different options. Here's where we are, here's where we can be, here's something that's just super high as far as the rate of return goes. And you can look at those different charts and see, hey, is this going to go backwards or so? But the proceeds, the death benefit, all that's going to be tax-free. When we look at the buckets over here, we got the taxable, we got the savings and the checkings, we got the stocks, the bonds, ETFs, mutual funds, real estate. Cryptos are really more still in that collectible space, but as we start to develop more technology, blockchain starts to pick up, we probably will see that get a little bit more generally accepted from the government or so. But right now, it's still so much in politics and everything being involved that, that's just a slippery slope to even speak on, honestly. But the annuities, the real estate, that's going to be in tax deferred. Remember, that real estate is you buying that house. You bought that house, you sold it 20 years later. That's why it's tax deferred, because you're deferring that tax out until you actually sell that property that you're living in. This one over here is going to be more, and that taxable is going to be more of your active flips. Could be more rental income that you're bringing in. You're paying taxes on that income that's coming in. 401ks, 403bs, TSPs, that's retirement accounts. Like I said, wherever you are, you can look up 401k here, wherever it is, and it's probably going to pull up something that's very similar. The rules are probably going to be similar, but I'm sure there may be some things differently. Individual retirement accounts, obviously, if you just need to do something for yourself or have something set up for yourself, that's there. And then you have like the muni bonds, 529 plans for your kids. Oh, in taxable, you also have what's called UTMAs. All right, so those are basically like investment accounts for your kids. So usually around like the first 1,150, could have changed and increased this year, but 1,150 is tax free. The next 1,150 is taxable based on your kids' taxable income level, and then the rest of it taxed at the parents. And by the time they reach age 18 or 21, it automatically becomes theirs. So you want to make sure that they are responsible. But when you're planning with your kids, 529s and UTMAs are very helpful. 529 is mostly for education. You can use it for private school too. The UTMA is more of their investment account. So you can just picture your investment account for yourself. This was for your kids, and it automatically becomes theirs at 18 or 21, depending on the state or where you are. But they can have investments too. And then with those 529s, based on where you are, especially states with state tax, a lot of those states may have 529s with the states, and you can actually contribute to those. They'll be guaranteed by the state, and you get a tax deduction as far as your state tax. So those may be some programs to look into as well. And some states have prepaid tuition plans too, where you can basically pay the state X amount, and then by the time your kids get there, they've locked in a tuition with the school, and they can basically choose the school within the state. But I would do that if you know for a fact your kid's about to go to this school or one of these schools here in this state. If it's not really that situation, you may want to check other options. And then as far as the mindset, it all started here. You got to choose to change at some point. I feel like I'm doing an altar call, Pastor Corley, but you got the denial stage, which you might even have success and still find some kind of denial. It might be something that you're being called to do, or you just need to do financially, or you just kind of been running from it. Fresh start to a year is the best year for you to try. Today's the best day of your life, regardless how you see it. Today's the newest day and the best day, so why not? And then as far as that uncertainty, of course, you got to take that leap of faith, and a lot of people get there, lose balance because they're holding themselves back. But once you choose to jump, what's it going to be like? And that's when we get deeper into that plan. Even you want to make that plan as you start to come out of uncertainty. You want to start to make that plan, but don't overthink it where you're planning so hard that you feel like you're doing something. Like, go ahead and make that plan, but ultimately you got to do it. And that's where the acts and actions are going to come in. And you want to make sure you have attainable steps and deadlines. All right. When am I going to do this by? What do I need to do? It's more here, but when am I going to do this by? And what do I need to do? And just do it. Of course, you might have some time to think and change some things around, but don't overthink where, you're not performing those acts, because you might relapse and start to get back to denial because you're feeling busy, but you're not busy, and you're just in a state of denial thinking you're busy. And then maintenance is just fine tuning, making sure you're good, doing reviews, and trying to figure out what's next. That way you may start over and just not the overall sense, but just in that one thing that you pursue. But yeah, I'm gonna zoom out. I definitely appreciate everyone's time. I'm glad, Pastor Corley was able to give me the floor, and I'm definitely appreciative. But does anyone have any, final questions before we get into those Saturdays?
Right. So, does anybody have any more questions? I mean, he's spoken about the denial stage, the uncertainty stage, preparation, actions, and maintenance. He also spoke about the relapse. So these are the various stages that each and everyone, in one way or the other, I believe everybody is either at the very beginning, the middle, or at the end. Some people are making some money moves, and they want to be able to maintain it over a period of time. How do you make sure you don't relapse to, you are making some investments, you are trying to save money. How do you make sure you don't get back to like square one? You have nothing, you have to start all over again.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to commitment. Ultimately, do you want that change or not? And then you might have to remind yourself of where you were, and I think that's an important exercise alone. Like a lot of people can find themselves down in the dump or feel like they're not where they need to be, but then sometimes you have to take a look back and realize where you were. Because you might not be looking back for good reasons. You might want to face forward just so you can keep marching, but at the same time, you might have to remind yourself of where you were. That way you don't go backwards. And just having that commitment, So from a religious standpoint, it's just kind of trusting the word and staying with God. From like a financial sense, I'll still go back to the religious one, but then, just looking at what didn't you like about that situation you were in, and how can you stay there? And then you might have that accountability. It might be friends that you can grow with, family that you can grow with, having someone like me on your team where, I'm going to see the numbers. I cry with you, pray with you, all that stuff too, but I'm going to see the numbers and help you keep that accountability from a numeric standpoint. But no one really wants to go back where they were. You might want to go back and visit and say, hey, help, but you don't really want to go back to square one. But you also don't want to sit still in fear of change, because change is going to happen around you regardless of how you feel. The world is still going to keep going. I'm pretty sure it's a ton of cool people that lived 1,000 years ago that we don't even know who they are, so you want to make sure that you can focus on what change you need to do, and overall, making sure that life is going to be better for you as you start to progress through it.
Awesome, awesome. Any more questions? I mean, anybody have any input they want to make to what we just discussed? Um, Spoke about credit, spoke about snowballing, diversification. Just listen to Jamal from the very beginning to this time. Um, if there is anybody on the line who didn't quite get it, I think this is the time you ask him, a question with reference to your very specific situation. Because there are, diverse people on the line who may not have an idea as to some of the things that were said with reference to 529 and so on and so forth. So if you are on the line, if you have a specific question with relation to where you are in terms of money, in terms of the moves that you are making that you want to ask specifically, this will be a good time to ask so that our resource person can give you, live advice on how to navigate through those particular things. This is what he does, and he has been a help to us in so many ways. So, does anybody have any question that they want to ask? From the delivery, is there something that is not clear that you want to ask before we bring the program to a close?
And before we, I guess, get the final question, so if anybody needs to or needs, to find me or look me up, the website is www.pride-financial.com. That's the website. Email address is going to be JAMALTHRELKELD, basically my name, at financialguide.com. And then I know we're going to be on YouTube, so I ain't going to throw the phone number out, but you go to the website. So I feel like I think you mentioned YouTube. So
Right.
if y'all go to the website, numbers there, but y'all got the email as well. I'll type it in here as well.
Yeah, in the chat.
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. Right. So, Mr. Jamal has promised to give us some resources to help in our bid to, be financially sound. As I said, please, you can put your email in the chat. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to send those documents to you directly into your email, so that you can begin to work over some of those things. But do you mind touching, quickly on budgeting?
Yeah, as you were saying it, I was like, oh man, I completely missed that. So, and that, let me go back up here, because like I said, a lot of this stuff is still going to come back down to like that overall mindset. Like, you have to choose. Like, even when you get into investment, buy low, sell high is the saying. Buy low, sell high. So I'm gonna write this up here so I don't forget, because I definitely want to tell y'all this while I'm here. So you can think about the stock market or so like clearance sales at different stores. So I know some individuals may go to the mall and be red tag specials and deals. Well, with those, at the beginning, when everything comes out, everything's usually regular price. But 3 or 4 months as the season changes, everything goes on clearance or things go on clearance. Very similar to the stock market. So the same shirt that cost you $100 in January might cost you 20 in March or April, but then next year they usually come out with the same stuff, and picture being able to sell that same $20 shirt for $100. So that same $100, you're able to go get 5 shirts in March or April, and now you can go sell those shirts for $100 a piece next January. Very similar to the stock market. So when everything's dipped, if you have a pretty diversified portfolio or so, you can actually weather the storm. So that's why I say make sure you have that cash and that emergency savings or so handy. That way you don't have to get so antsy if you start to see things fall, because a bear market or a market when it drops 20% or lower and just kind of continues or so may average closer to around 10 months. But like the up bull markets may average a little bit over 3 years. All right. And then as you get deeper into retirement, you may even want to have at least 3 years of expenses reserved, just in case we do go into like a market situation. Because when we look at the Great Depression here in the United States from October 1929 to around like July, August 1932, that was the real economic, well, I can't say economic, that was the stock market bear market. All right, so it was really about 3 years, even though the Great Depression lasted longer than that. As far as the investments go, the investments had more so a rough 3 years, and then they started to see like some nice returns. So in retirement, you want to have closer to like 3 years of expenses built up. As far as like just making it along the way, about 3 to 6 months of expenses saved up, almost at a minimum. But when we're looking at that budget, that let me find a spot. When we're looking at that budget, you want to go ahead and list out different things, because once you've chosen, I got all these arrows on choosing, but once you've chosen that you do need that change, go ahead and write out what's going on, what you need to overcome, but then write out those expenses as well. Because when you write out those expenses, now you can see what are your outflows. All right, what's going out. But then you can also see what is your income, what's coming in, what's my inflow. So if those inflow, if you're bringing in $5,000 and you do your expense sheet or your budget just to see how much is going out each month, you might see that $3,000 is getting pushed out. So that leaves you with $2,000. After that $2,000 is there, what type of strategies do I need to implement? And that's where we get deeper into the plan, because it's like you might have $2,000 left over, but you can snowball or use the avalanche technique on some of that debt and still save, just to make sure that you are knocking out your liabilities, but your assets are also growing. And you might even compare the rate of returns, because your debt might be at 0% interest rate, or 5 or 7 or 24, but your investments are getting you 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever, so you can also weigh like what rate of return is happening on your assets, or what interest rates are being applied to your debt obligations. But as far as like the budget, it's all going to come down to knowing what your inflows and outflows are. Usually if you aren't at least aware of what's going out, that's going to involve the state of denial over here. So if you can go ahead and list out like what things you need to overcome, but then also what things you have to pay for each month guaranteed, and then maybe even include some lifestyle expenses too, hair, nails, some different things like that. Social activities, if you're doing that monthly, go ahead and throw that in there and see what's truly coming out. And if you want to do a deep scrub, pull 3 months of bank statements and start highlighting and writing stuff, and then list out what you've been spending money on. That'll be a real eye opener, because most people realize how much junk food and DoorDash and all this stuff they've been buying. But the budget is going to just basically come down to seeing what are those outflows. Then you look at your inflows, and then that's going to show you what's left. And whatever's left, that's where you become more strategic, and that's where the strategy lies.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Any more questions? Something you want to ask? with reference to the presentation. Somebody wants to know whether you are sharing this presentation. Well, the presentation is being recorded. Definitely, you can definitely get it on YouTube as well. So you can definitely just play it again. If you go to YouTube, just go to the church's website, Abundant Life Word Ministries. You'll be able to get it over there. It's also on Facebook, on our page, on my page as well, on those sites. Or you can go to the website, www.abundantlife.org. Every information is also there. So you'll be able to watch this presentation again from the very beginning and gain an available insight. Okay. Anybody with any more questions with reference to budgeting, credit?
Mark, I know you just asked that question. I appreciate y'all giving the great feedback here too. I feel like I saw Rachel say she was going to teach the kids. So like I would say, I actually got an article I'm going to get ready to start on. But when it comes to teaching the kids, ultimately it's going to come down to our habits individually too. So for those that have kids, y'all, I got 3 girls. I've been up here in my home office for 3 hours. I'm surprised ain't nobody knocked yet. It's coming once that 2-hour mark hits though, Mark. So we know, but ultimately when you look at your kids, sometimes you might notice something that you do that they do that you didn't necessarily teach them, or it might be something that you do that they do that they learn from you that you didn't try to teach them, but you taught them unintentionally. So a lot of times our individual habits are going to rub off on who they ultimately become. So we aren't fighting those demons. We don't want to leave them for them. So it's like, how do we get rid of that stuff so they don't ultimately inherit it? But then also, what are some of those good things that we can create and make habits for them while they're little? That way, when they're older, they're a lot stronger, and it's in them. They know it, but they don't know that they know it. It's just a habit. They're used to saving. They're used to having investments. They know what large cap stocks are. They know what these things are, just because it's been conditioned into developing these great habits. So we lead off with having those great habits with our kids. Ultimately, that's going to trump anything, because that's going to help them for better decision making in the future, and being able to have that patience to weigh different things, different pros and cons, like we mentioned earlier. So all the other stuff, 529s, all that stuff is cool, but ultimately it's going to come down to the habits that we help them develop.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, hey, Jamal, I want to say a big thank you to you for joining us and sharing this wealth of information. His website and email is definitely in the chat. Please feel free to reach out for more information. But we believe that it's not just being spiritual. There are also some physical things that we need to do to be able to be who God has called us to be. So it's not only prayer, but we need to zone in and make the adjustments that we need to make in our finances. I want to thank everybody that joined us today, wherever you are, joining us from. We'll see. I know we have people from Ghana, we have people from Zambia, we have people from Temba. God bless you for joining us. Kapalo, God bless you for joining us. Miss Rachel, Miss Sky, and we have people coming in and out. God bless you all for joining us. I hope this has been great. We would love to hear your feedback. And so, the email is in the comment section, abundantlife2018@gmail.com. Let us know if you have some feedback for us. Definitely, we're going to organize these to touch on some other financial issues. God bless you and wish you the best of the day. Tomorrow we have service at 3:30 p.m. online. Join us if you can. God bless.
Thanks again, everybody. Y'all have a good one. God bless.
Thank you. Us.
Appreciate the time. Mark, I catch you, man.
All right, man.
All right, brother. All right.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Oh yeah, appreciate y'all.
Okay. Bye bye. Very valuable.